And we are live. We are live as we count down to kickoff for the Cotton Bowl. Alabama, Cincinnati getting ready to face off in, I guess, 4 hours? Do I have my math right? 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. 2:30 on ESPN. Matt Scalisi joining me now for our Playoff Central show here as Alabama gets ready for its, I guess, I don't even know what debut this is in the college football playoff, Matt. You probably know that because you always got all the
You're
stats.
talking about how many times they've been in the college
Yeah.
football playoffs?
How many times have they been in there? So
I think this
2014.
is their 8th appearance in the college football playoffs since it started.
Yeah, so this is year 8 because 2013 was the last year.
Oh, then I'm wrong.
So 7.
Yeah.
It would be 7, right?
This is
Yeah.
their
So
7th.
we got that straight. Hey, we thank you guys for watching. We also want to thank our sponsors on this one, Medical Properties Trust. They've been with us, joining us for all of our playoff content. We appreciate you. And of course, we appreciate our viewers jumping in. If you guys have any questions, comments, please feel free to weigh in there. Matt and I are going to break this thing down as we get ready for today's matchup. And I was just talking to Matt, it's a little different and weird that Alabama's kicking off at 2:30. They're usually in that time slot, obviously on CBS during the season, but typically in the college football playoff, we're used to it being nighttime. We're used to them kicking off in the evening game after the first one's already been played. So this is a little bit different for us media folk covering it. And of course, Alabama as they get ready for the game.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, Lauren. I think it's interesting because we're here in Dallas on the ground, and we're used to the playoffs always being a big bustling scene on the media end of things. There's always, all the big national media folks are here. There's lots of fans around all over the place. It really hasn't been like that this week. There are a lot of Cincinnati fans around here. There are, seems to be a lot of excitement on that side. Understandably so. This is the first time that they've ever been in this position before. But I think we'll probably see more Alabama fans showing up today and more energy on the day of the game. But it hasn't been the kind of scene that we're used to around here. And I think it's because a lot of the national media folks are in Miami. That has sort of stolen the spotlight a little bit this week because I think there's two, big sort of sexy names in Georgia and Michigan. It's a regional matchup between two blue blood powers. In some ways, I think as excited as everybody was for a Group of 5 team to make it to the playoffs, I think there is not a ton of heat, not the same level of sort of anticipation of this game as we've seen in some of the other playoff matchups Alabama's been in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point you make. And talking to Joe Goodman earlier this week, we talked specifically kind of about the expectation, anticipation of the crowd that will be there. And if you're an Alabama fan and you're deciding on where you're going to spend your money, where you're going to put all your chips, most likely you might want to save up for the national championship just because of the matchup and maybe the thought that this might not be as illustrious as maybe previous college football playoff matchups have been, with them being, as you said, the first Group of 5 team in. And that kind of gets me to sort of the matchup in and of itself, right? So Alabama opened as a 13.5-point favorite against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, making college football history, becoming the first Group of 5 program to make it into the college football playoff. So there is that, star power. There is that, kind of the history part of it. And I think there will be a significant amount of Cincinnati fans there in the stadium today. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. They might have a little bit more of advantage from a fan standpoint. But with that being said, Cincinnati winning the, American Athletic Conference over Houston, and they come into this as one of college football's, they own some categories, or at least are in the top 5 when you look at where they stand against other teams in the FBS. So you got number 2 in pass defense. They're good in the red zone, good red zone defense, good in scoring defense. So defensively, they come in and they can make things difficult for the Tide. But if we're looking at Bama's biggest advantage, we'll start there, Matt. I think one of the things I'm looking at personally is the depth that this Alabama football team has. I think Cincinnati has good players. I think Cincinnati has good talent. But the problem is, I don't think they have the depth that Alabama has, that Alabama will have the ability to wear them down fairly quickly. And, of course, you've got Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young leading the charge. The offensive line has improved. So, that's kind of what I'm seeing as Bama's biggest advantage is they've just got the depth that they can kind of churn things out and wear them down into 4 quarters of this football game.
I totally agree. I think when you're talking about a game like this, look, upsets obviously happen in college football, and there are a thousand cases we could all think of right now of the little guy beating the big guy, of David beating Goliath. But I think the vast they're upsets for a reason. It's because it's rare that happens, and in this sport, talent makes a big difference, and a part of the reason why that is the case is because this is a sport where you build an 85-man roster. So your amount of talent, the ability to amass talent on your roster is a big deal, and it gives you a big advantage over schools that maybe they can put a great starting lineup out there on the field. But there just aren't very many schools out there that can have 85 guys as high quality as what Alabama brings to the table in a game like this. And I think you're right that is something Cincinnati does not have. They have some extremely talented players, some guys who are going to be playing in the NFL out in that starting lineup. But sometimes you need more than 22 guys to win a football game. And I think that's where Alabama will have a big advantage. It's the depth. It's the guys they're going to be bringing into the game and rotating in throughout the game. It's what happens when there's an injury and you have to put a backup out there. It's what happens when the other team comes out in a formation that you're not ready for, and you've got to put a different package of people on the field than you're comfortable playing. What is that guy who is coming out on the field? How talented is he? Because maybe he hasn't played as many snaps as some of your other starters. So this is a sport where depth can make a massive difference, much more so than maybe when we watch the NCAA basketball tournament and we see those sort of upsets happening all over the place in the first round. They're a lot more rare in college football, and it's because you have to have a lot of good players to be good at this sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on the comments here, enjoying some of this. I know we have some people that are in Dallas right now, and Celicia Kennedy Jackson cracks me up over here. She's got the rat poison emojis going, because I'm going to take a nap just in case I need to pass out during the game. I personally might be taking a nap too before we get this thing started. It's going to be a long day because not only do we obviously have Alabama and Cincinnati, then right behind it at 6:30 on ESPN, we'll be watching Georgia and Michigan. I can imagine the ratings for both of these games, and certainly that one this evening will also be way up there as everyone kind of anxiously awaits to see what the outcome of that game is and the winner of those two games playing the national championship. All right, so we talk about Alabama's biggest advantage. Let's go to Cincinnati. And for Cincinnati, personally, Matt, I think the secondary, and I think we pointed to this quite a bit. And if there's one thing that you've heard sort of the national media talk about, your Herb Streets and guys like that from the analysis side of things, the Cincinnati secondary matches up pretty well with this Alabama football team. I think that could be their biggest strength. Their cornerbacks there. You got Sauce Gardner, which of course I love the name, as my nickname is Lauren Saucler because I love sauce.
That's right.
So of course I'm drawn to Ahmad Sauce Gardner. He's one of the best defensive players in the FBS, and I do think that he has a chance to potentially wreak some havoc, especially with Jamison Williams there. Some of those explosive plays that we've seen Bryce Young and Jamison Williams rip off throughout the season, and more specifically here towards the end with some of those big plays we saw against Georgia's stout defense. So I'm looking at the secondary specifically for the Cincinnati team being a pretty big advantage. And we know on the other side of things, the secondary for Alabama has been a little bit of a knock for them. They've had some struggles this season. So I do think Cincinnati's secondary can be the bigger advantage for them in this one. And they could take advantage if Alabama is not dotting their I's, crossing their T's, if you know what I mean.
Sure. I mean, I think they have some individual matchup advantages in this game that Alabama's going to have to figure out a way around. And thankfully for Alabama, they have a lot of talented options really on both sides of the ball. I mean, sometimes it feels like you're having those sort of first world problems when you're Alabama. You're complaining about the fact that you're having to put a 5-star recruit on the field instead of the starter that was in that spot before. And that's kind of where Alabama's going to be in that secondary. They are missing Josh Jobe, one of their key starters on that back end of that defense. But you're probably replacing him with a guy in Kool-Aid McKinstry or Jalen Armour Davis back there, depending on the package, that these guys were among the most highly coveted recruits in the country. So the talent is there. It speaks to what I think, though, is Cincinnati's biggest overall advantage in this game, which is that they are a senior group that has played a lot of games together. And, I think it's easy for us to forget now because Alabama is here. They're in the playoffs. We've kind of swept aside from our minds all of those concerns that we were having about the team during the season. But this was a young Alabama team that was replacing a ton of important parts. And, Alabama doesn't really ever have, because of how well they recruit, you're never going to get sympathy from anybody for saying this was supposed to be a rebuilding year for Alabama. This was going to be a down year. But it kind of was. This was supposed to be a team that was going to take some time to figure out who they were. It did take them some time. But I think that aside, that as talented as this team obviously is, they're still relatively inexperienced. They have not played a ton of games together. Looked like they were starting to figure things out at the very end of the Iron Bowl and in that SEC championship game. But, when they get out there on the field in this situation, in a playoff game, that they now know everybody's expecting them to win this game. So there's a different kind of pressure there than what they faced in the SEC championship game. How do they react to that? How do they react to the weight of that expectation and responsibility versus a team like Cincinnati, who's coming into this game? They're playing with house money at this point. They have already become the first group of 5 team to ever make the playoffs. There's reason enough to celebrate right there. The fact that they even made it to this stage with Alabama. So anything they do from here, any good plays they make, any momentum they get early in this game, the energy is going to be through the roof. The chemistry between these guys is going to be clicking. They're going to remember every good game they've ever played together. And I think there is a chance for that experience and that team chemistry to turn into an advantage for Cincinnati if they can get some good things happening for them early in this game. So that's something to watch for. I think the first quarter of this game is going to be so important for both teams, because if you're Cincinnati, you can potentially rattle this Alabama team early and make them say, "Oh no, we're having one of those bad games again, like we had against LSU, like we had against Auburn." But I think it's something that we often overlook because it's not football, it's not X's and O's, but emotions play a huge role in this sport, and I think that Cincinnati has perhaps a little bit of an advantage when it comes to that, just because they've played together so many times at this point. And this Alabama team's still relatively young, still hasn't quite had as many reps together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And momentum shift to me is such a key part of the game, as you said. I think a lot of times we do sort of look at the X's and O's and the matchups and the players and the stats and the numbers. And there is something to be said about momentum shifts, and you can feel it when you're watching a game, when you're sitting in that stadium and things are sort of unfolding in your mind. You come to a crossroads, an intersection where you're like, okay, this team, if they do this and they, whether it's a turnover, cough up the football, end up getting an explosive play, you rip off a 70-yard touchdown, something that steers the ship with momentum. And then you build on that. You keep building on that, building on that, and building on that. I think that is certainly where Cincinnati could build on that and kind of have that play in their favor, especially in a game like this where, they've got everything going for them. And really, at the end of the day, to me, Cincinnati doesn't have much to lose. Like, they're here, they've made it, they come in, they've got all the emotions with them. How have they handled their business this week? I think that'll be interesting to see, just because things are different when you get to this caliber of football. And we know that this week is kind of from a bowl standpoint, and it's a little different right now with COVID still being very present, but I will say that there's still activities, still things going on, but this is very much treated like a bowl week. Next week, when the national championship rolls around, it's very much more a business trip, get in, get out, we're done. So I would be interested in just seeing how Cincinnati has handled their business this week throughout this process.
I think that's a great point, and that can be a distraction in and of itself. We know that Alabama took a team vote to
Lock them
basically,
up.
yeah,
Lock
they
it up.
said, we're staying in the hotel. We're not going to do anything this week. We're not treating this like a bowl trip
Yeah.
where we're doing
And
all
they've
this
been here a million times. So for them, like,
and I think it's interesting. I certainly don't blame any players or teams who want to do that kind of stuff. It is a once in a lifetime opportunity for a lot of people. But some of the Cincinnati players have been taking in some more sights this week. Some of them went to the Cowboys game on Sunday last week there, or I think it was Monday night. There's cool stuff to do in Dallas. You can have fun here. There's activities going on. Alabama chose not to do that. They chose to stay in and focus on football. I saw some videos today of Michigan players out on the beach yesterday. So I think it speaks to the fact that there's different approaches to this sport, and certain coaches and players like to do things different ways. This is very much in line with how Alabama operates. This is a business to them. This is a career investment for all of these guys who are here. They have plans to play football when they are gone from Alabama, and a lot of them sure end up doing that. So I think it's a clash of not just two teams from two different ends of college football, but it's also like two different cultures. It's two different approaches to the sport.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we wrap up here with my final topic, I will say, so I was at the Peach Bowl yesterday covering the Peach Bowl for ESPN Radio, and Mel Tucker was on, obviously, the sideline, second-year coach for Michigan State. He is, a disciple of Nick Saban. He's been in that coaching tree, and his approach is so much the same. And, I mean, literally the word process comes out of these coaches' mouths time and time and time again. And that was something he said, we come here, we show up, we know what is at stake. We know we have an 11-win season, a first New Year's Six bowl game win for him, of course. I think that to me is just, it is so apparent when you cover another team and that somehow they've been part of the Nick Saban coaching tree, because it's all in the language. It's all in the way they handle business. Even on the sidelines, you can just see it. And it's crazy how that resonates and reverberates all through college football. And it all ties back to one man, and that is Nick Saban. So it's pretty cool stuff there.
His fingerprints are all over the sport at this point. I mean, look at the other semifinal today. I mean, most of Georgia's coaching staff worked for Nick Saban at some point. Michigan's offensive coordinator worked for Nick Saban and was a part of a championship run staff there too. Is almost nowhere you can look in this sport where Nick Saban hasn't had some kind of impact on the sport. So it is fascinating to see. This is the ultimate icon of this sport today, going up against the ultimate underdog, one of the big underdog Cinderella stories in this sport's history today. So there will be a lot on the line. There will be a lot of interest, and I think that no matter what happens in this game, it's going to be a sort of historical occasion, I think, that gets referenced a lot.
Yep, absolutely. All right, before I let you go, real quick, Matt, I want to get into the key matchup here before we send our viewers off to rest for a couple hours before the game starts. I know y'all got to go cook up your little cocktail weenies and your meatballs and your whatever thing you're jiving with. My new favorite thing are cocktail weenies wrapped in bacon with brown sugar. That's like my new thing. Love it.
Little pig and blanket situation, but the blanket is meat.
The blanket is meat, and there's got to be sugar on it. Duh. Yeah. You know me. Got to have sugar. I agree. So key matchup. I'll go first, Matt. I think, to me, a key matchup that I'm looking at, quarterback Desmond Ridder. He's got some ability, big-time playmaking ability, tried and true. Can do some things on his legs as well. I'm looking at Desmond Ridder versus this Alabama pass rush. So, both teams here have had the opportunity to rest up, even playing ground there. Guys are rested up. So I think Alabama's defensive front specifically, and Will Anderson, obviously, chomping at the bit to make some big plays, get after Cincinnati, that offensive line, of course, the quarterback, Desmond Ridder. So that, to me, is going to be a key matchup. What is that going to look like? Can they pressure the quarterback? Can Desmond Ridder stay on his feet, stay comfortable, or is he going to be able to pick up some yardage on his legs there. And that's certainly something we'll be kind of keeping an eye on, I think, throughout this matchup. But does Alabama's pass rush get after it and shut this thing down early?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Will Anderson has a chance to be the guy walking away with the MVP trophy from this game today. He can make a huge impact on this game and disrupt Cincinnati's offense. And I think we know from no matter how good Cincinnati's defense is, if you want to beat Alabama, odds are if you're looking across the whole season, it means you got to put up a bunch of points. It means you got to be very productive offensively. So Cincinnati needs a great day from their whole offense, and part of that means keeping their quarterback safe. So that's going to be big. If I'm picking a key matchup today, Lauren, I'm going a little bit non-traditional from what we would think about for these two teams, and I think to me it's Alabama's ground game versus that Cincinnati defensive front. This has not been a big advantage for Alabama for most of the year. They have not necessarily relied on the running game to win most of their games this season. They've gotten beaten up at running back. They've lost several key players at that position. But I think part of the formula to sort of take Cincinnati out of this game today, we all know their strength is these two great defensive backs, these two corners that are going to try and lock down Jameson Williams and the Alabama receivers and give Bryce Young a hard time passing it. Well, the best possible solution to that is take them out of the game and run the ball, dominate up front, and control the ground in this game. Eat up the clock. Don't let Cincinnati have a lot of time of possession. If Alabama was able to do that, I think that is a good way to take the energy out of this Cincinnati team in the game. They have a healthy Brian Robinson at this point that they really haven't had for a good chunk of the last month of the season.
Yeah, no doubt.
They seem like they maybe figured some things out on the offensive line against Georgia. So if they can get that clicking and they can start, really reeling off 3, 4, 5 yard runs and make that a big part of the offensive game plan today, I think that totally takes Cincinnati kind of out of their comfort zone in terms of the game they're going to try to play today.
Yep. Good points. All great points. Definitely looking forward to this one. It's going to be fun. This is kind of that time of year as we wind down and we get to see the big stage, the lights on the big stage, and certainly excited to watch this game and, of course, tonight's game as well. So Alabama, Cincinnati, you can catch that today, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN. Of course, we've got boots on the ground, our entire team at AL.com, our beat writers, Matt, obviously, our video team, Laura Goldman. I know Clay Yeager's there. We'll give a shout out to Wes Steiner, Patrick Greenfield, everyone out there doing their jobs, getting it done. Of course, our beat writers, Mike Casagrande, Mike Rodak, those guys out there as well as John Talty, Joseph Goodman.
Just giving the whole crew a shout out.
Giving the whole crew a shout out because y'all, it's December 31st and we're about to close the chapter on this book. And I just want to say thank you to everyone, the hard work. You guys don't understand just the amount of time that you guys put into coverage and the countless hours, and it's nonstop, and it's waking up early on a Sunday morning and continuing the coverage, and then it rolls into Monday and press conferences and players conferences and practice and everything else, and then game day. So it's a constant cycle. We're coming to the finish line, but we're not quite there yet. So guys, we appreciate you, all of you guys at AL.com, the AL.com family. I love y'all. And we'll have more post-game coverage for you guys coming up shortly after the game ends. So tune in here on Facebook and YouTube for a post-game recap with myself and Matt Scalisi here. And we thank you for watching. And of course, we thank our sponsor, Medical Properties Trust. Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.